I'm Joshua Phillips with the Encounter Training. I'm here with Derek Watson.
Hello.
Facilitator of I like to call you facilitator, trainer of the Encounter Training, which we are about to start one tomorrow. So Derek's in town from North Carolina to hang out with us and make a difference in a bunch of people's lives. In case you don't know, the Encounter Training is a 4-day intensive. I think people like to use that word, intensive, transformational type event that's experiential in nature. And we've been doing this work together for over 20 years.
Hard to believe.
It is hard to believe that we
are that old.
That we are that old, and to think that we met 29 years ago. So I guess that's a good place to start. So
it's like we're married.
You have definitely spent nearly a year at our house. I mean, we just kind of refer to it as Derek's room, so because you're here.
You do rent it out to other people occasionally.
We do rent it out, but you're our favorite guest.
And
so
I don't get a slice of that. I don't understand.
There's no rental fee. If we don't charge you anything to be here. So anyway, so it's good to hang out. So you've been actually doing this work for north of 30 years.
30 years this year.
30 years. Wow. So, 30 years ago, Derek, who would have been, in your mid-30s?
34.
Would you imagine that you would have still be doing this work, 30 years later?
For me, it's not surprising to me that I'm still doing it. I could imagine doing it for years and years and years, God willing, and if the scientists come up with a pill that turns us back to 30-year-olds. But so I don't envision ever not doing it. This is really kind of an expression of my heart, who God made me to be, and so it would be like not breathing or something.
Yeah, it seems like a wonderful fit for who you are, who God made you to be, and you've been a blessing to so many people here in the Nashville area. You also do trainings in Oklahoma City. I'll go ahead and mention under the name Possibilities for Life, where you're doing trainings there, and you've made a difference with thousands of people over the years, and we're so blessed to have you being a part of what we're doing here. So,
well, I'm honored.
Well, tell me, you often say that when we start a training, the only thing you think about really is your kind of opening thoughts. So as you're thinking about the training coming up, what's on your mind? Where are you thinking of starting? What's the opening conversation?
Well, it's always a variant on a theme. What I'm really thinking about is how to open up the biggest possibility for people, like, trying to meet them where they're at and opening up the idea that, God has something for them that's like beyond even what they're imagining. People come in wanting things, but the things that they want kind of live inside the realm of what they see as possible already. And I think the training really is about exceeding that, going to something unprecedented, not just an evolution of what they've seen in the past. And so, what I'm always trying to figure out, how can I open up an inquiry with them so that they would be open to something that they hadn't really thought of before. And, I think, people try everything they can think of to get to where they want to go. And still they might be stymied. They may not bridge that gap, as we've talked about various times.
Yeah.
And, so I'm trying to figure out, how can I be with them in such a way that they're willing to imagine something far beyond what, they came in thinking about.
Yeah. So I think people do often, of course, we prepare them with questions, and we do a support call with everybody, and so we're trying to help prime the pump of what people are there for. And of course, the opening conversation is around, what are you here for? I mean, what kind of things do you typically hear from participants on that first morning?
Well, the way I frame the question, it's really an experience. Like, what experience, if they could have any experience, what would they want? And so that helps it move out from, like, I'd like a better house, or, I don't want to upgrade my car, or my job, or, whatever it may be. And, but in experience, people can meet very clearly, they can, and frankly, it really comes down to almost like the fruit of the Spirit. When you really kind of think about it: love, joy, peace, patience, well, patience isn't one of the ones that people are like, yeah, give me more patience.
Yeah.
But it's that kind of experience of God's presence ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah. And so your opening questions are to really, and you try to help them refine what they're thinking about. Like they do start out a lot of times kind of stumbling over what they want. Those that are brave enough to stand up.
Yeah, most of them are, committed to being vague.
Yeah.
Ultimately, and because it's safer, I think, that way. Because if I really articulate in detail what the desire of my heart is, I start facing into what if I don't get that. And so it's almost like there's a natural hesitance to really be specific. And so I'll just ask, repeated clarifying questions, like to make it specific. And what's amazing all the time is people, when they get specific, they drop down into their emotions in a more profound way versus, what you would normally say, meet somebody at a party, a Christmas party. You're just kind of like, yeah, what do you do? How,
yeah.
But, when we get down to some meaningful emotion, that's where people start feeling connected to each other.
So can you give an example of that? Like what that might look like in an opening kind of conversation?
Yeah, some would say, well, quite often people will say what they don't want. Well, I don't want to be alone. Okay, well, all right. What is it that, where do you feel alone right now? Well, it's in my marriage, or in my, I'm just, estranged from my parents, or whatever it might be. And so it's about kind of just following the thread of, because they're talking about something specific, but often their languaging of it is very vague.
Mm-hmm. And then you often will flip something from the negative to the positive, because and we're just kind of talking about what actually happens, what will happen tomorrow, where you're actually writing things up on a board about what people are there for. And they do often come in with, I don't want this, I don't want that, and you're flipping it into what do they want? Yeah, what do they want?
Because obviously, or maybe not so obviously, you can be, a push motivation pushes you away from something. It doesn't really give you direction the way a pull motivation does, where it's, I'm being pulled towards a specific thing versus I just want to avoid that other thing.
Yeah, yeah. So you kind of touched on this earlier. I think people, I would grant that everyone that's coming to the Encounter training has done work, right?
Absolutely.
They've done work. They've maybe been to therapy. They've read books. They're most of them diligent, and yet still there's that gap there, and oftentimes they're pursuing things in the realm of knowledge. They just want to know more, and I think that's where we kind of jump on a different track, because we're not necessarily trying to help people know more.
Exactly. I think people probably know too much already. Our world is awash with facts. Any piece of information is, a query to Grok away or ChatGPT, or, give me a summary of this, and boom, you have it. And so facts really are overrated, I think. And so, talking about that gap, where does that gap come from? Well, it comes, I think, from, we end up being a certain way. We wound up being the way we are because through life we made certain decisions. I'm good at this. I'm not good at that. I can succeed here. I'm not going to succeed there. Mm-hmm. And so those decisions create almost our identity. This is who I am. I'm good at math. Oh, I'm not good at math. I'm good at English. Whatever it might be. And how we wound up being is really great. It's not like a bad thing.
Yeah.
However, it's not all that God has called us to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think certainly every Christian would agree with that, that we're on a journey towards something greater. And part of the training is about clarifying how to bridge that gap. How do you jump, in essence, that, how do I transcend who God made, or how I wound up being, so that I can actually be who God made me to be.
Yeah, and it's still even a mystery to me today. I've thought a lot about it, like you, about how do you become who you become. I think about my mom and dad a lot. They were very affirming of me. They were always like, you're going to be successful in whatever you do. You always fall on your feet. Like, just things work out for you. And I've just kind of believed that to be true. And then I look at maybe, not to judge my siblings, but I don't know if they really, even though I think they were told the same things, I don't know that they really lived.
It didn't land on them.
It didn't land the same way. And of course, we're both parents, and now we're both grandparents. We're both grandpas. And so it is so interesting to see how people, our kids are so different, and even raised in the same environment. So it's almost a mystery to some degree how our belief systems are developed. Any thoughts you have on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think a lot of it is just based on reactions. Something happens and I make a decision about, that must mean I'm not X, and so over time those stack up and they kind of form a particularly unique constellation of characteristics. One of the things I really think about a lot about is that, we're not really, ultimately, we're not who I am referring to when I say I or me. I mean, that's my identity, but I am much bigger than my identity. I'm more like the space where the world shows up, and if you think about it, you can step back from yourself and say, notice how I'm reacting here, there, and the other way. So in some sense, you're not in that position. You're outside of it, looking and noticing how you're reacting and relating, and so that to me speaks of we're more that space. And one of the things that shows up in that space is who you say, when I say I or me, that thing. And other people and relationships and all sorts of things.
And we also have like many different selves, I think. Like there's the me that can be actually shy and tentative, and then there's the me that can be courageous and outgoing, and it depends on which me walks in the room. And oftentimes I think that, maybe we'll bring it full circle to one of our main questions in the encounter training, which is what experience are you committed to cause, which is at the core of the training. So I think maybe let's switch gears into that. I mean, because that helps orient you in who the self is by how you show up to other people. Yeah,
and it's one way to think about that question, which I think people at first in the training kind of struggle with a little bit, like what do you mean? And it's ultimately, who will I be for others? Will it be an experience of love? Will it be an experience of acceptance? Will I be an experience of joy, freedom? Any of those things. And the amazing thing to me is that when you declare I'm committed to cause love, and then you start on that journey to create that experience, you actually come up against the things that stop you. And so you actually can, it's a way to focus the internal struggle, in a sense, towards something that is actually going to be a breakthrough.
Yeah, and it's results oriented, outside of yourself. So it's how it lands in other people, not how you think it lands, or how you want it to land. It's just like, what's the reality and experience of other people.
And I think, what's always amazing is that, I think people come in thinking, okay, if I am going to cause an experience of love, I need to be loving. Like I need to have a warm, it needs to be a loving kind of something that I'm sharing.
Just really kind and gentle.
Yeah, versus really even, if you think about perhaps, the greatest act of love was Jesus on the cross. Which was not a lovey kind of situation. I mean, and so through our tragedies and sharing our tragedies freely, I think we can actually, connect in a way that's life-giving. It's really quite, I mean, to me, it's a remarkable demonstration of the idea of what repentance or redemption is, where it's, it's taking what's negative and horrific and bringing something powerful and good out of it.
Yeah. Well, we've kind of referenced this a number of times. We'll say the experience, and I think that's really the secret sauce, or what makes the training unique. It does take it out of the realm of knowledge and just saying a lot of words and having an experience with people. And I think that's, of course, ultimately one of the things we're trying to help people do is to see their belief systems, to see things more clearly. And you generally are going to see that through an experience. I often will say, like, I could watch you play a game of Monopoly, and I could probably learn a lot about how you live your life by how you play that game. And that's one of the easiest ways, I think, to talk about or share with someone about the idea of an experience. I'm like, and if you had a skilled facilitator that actually had good insights, they really could see a lot about your life, even as something as simple as how you play a game, which maybe the encounter training is a game to some degree.
Well, yes, it is. And it's a game in the sense that it's contrived. The structure is contrived. But I really wonder what it means that I don't like Monopoly.
I don't really like it either.
Yeah, you're more. You
much more complex,
highfalutin games.
Yeah. We're on another level.
But yeah, so I think which brings up the point. The training is a series of structured experiences which are contrived. They're, in some ways, situations that are constructed by me in the training. But what's, even in those constructed experiences, people's reactions will be what it is. Just like you're saying, how I play Monopoly, is reflective of how I live my life. How I clean my garage is reflective of how I live my life. And so, that often in the training, I'll talk about life being holographic, which ultimately a hologram is each bit of the hologram contains the whole picture. And so I think, we, in any moment, if we look close enough to how we're living, we can see the whole thing. We can see how our life is transpiring. And so by, in some ways, simplifying life in the training, we can get to, really important issues quickly.
Yeah.
Because we are kind of taking away all of the extraneous distractions and rabbit holes and things that people kind of circle in their life.
Yeah, and I like saying it is contrived, just like game Monopoly is contrived. You don't actually own properties on the boardwalk. We're imagining in a certain situation, and that's a lot like what much of the training is. Yeah, it's contrived, and it's up to the participants whether they find meaning in it or whether they find it meaningless. I think that's one of the struggles, and that's probably one of the struggles in life is what is happening meaningful or meaningless to me. And I think I always encourage the participants that come through the training to take on the stance that this is meaningful. And if you view it as meaningful, you're going to find meaning. And if you just view it as meaningless, I've played games before. It's like playing a game, man. It's like people that play, we take our games seriously. I'm not overly competitive, but I do take the game seriously. And when I play with someone that is not taking it seriously, like, this is just stupid, then it's like, what's the fun in that? Like we are playing in this certain box here. And so I love the work. Of course, I always have loved the work of what we do and the meaning I think that people gain out of it.
And I think ultimately this question of meaning, we in our culture tend to think that meaning is embedded in the thing. The experience has a certain meaning. And ultimately, I think the reality is that whatever happens. It is what it is, and we're adding the meaning, and they're in some sense unrelated. Like, this happening is just an occasion for me to actually ascribe meaning. Mm-hmm. And so the power, I think, in that is that I can take any situation and create a meaning that makes it purposeful and powerful and impactful, or like you're saying, or I can make it meaningless, unimportant, trivial.
Yeah. In my mind, when you're saying that, kind of goes to the spiritual side of things as a Christian. I think being a believer in something, that there's a God, that there's Jesus who lived and died and rose again, and there's a purpose for my life, and there's redemption, that there's so much more value in that than this perspective that life means nothing, and I'm just a bunch of atoms, and so the training is definitely grounded in our Christian faith, and that helps give meaning to everything we do.
Absolutely. And I think in some sense we take the what Christ did as an example, and I think in my experience quite a few Christians feel like God isn't coming through for them. And one of the presumptions I bring to the training is, in Christ we have everything for life and godliness, as it says in Peter. And if his divine power has already granted me all this, if it's not happening, is it really, on his shoulders that it's not happening, or is it somehow I am not doing my part?
Yeah.
And so, we really talk about, we come from the place of God's already done his work. Now, that doesn't, I still pray for God's blessing, and I believe his spirit moves in the world. I'm not discounting that. But in what we're talking about is more how, more how we can take action in alignment with his will to gain the ground that we're after.
Yeah, I was for me the training is very much rooted in Hebrews 12, and I was rereading Hebrews 12:1 this morning. Since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let's run the race. And I was noticing this morning, I've read it 1,000 times, but when it said to throw off, at least in the version I was looking at, the weight and the sin, and it's actually drawing a distinction between the weight and the sin. Okay, so often in the training, we are concerned about sin, but we're also concerned about weight. And I think much of the training, like what is the weight? What is the weight? That is the, perhaps the belief systems, the trauma, all the things that just distract us and get in our way. And I think so much of the training, yes, again, we do address sin, but we also address the weights that weigh us down. And I know our hearts, as people leave the training, setting aside some of that weight and being able to run the race that God has set out for them to run.
That's a great distinction. I mean, to me, a lot of the weight comes down to unfelt emotions. If you think, we have grandkids, as you mentioned, and they fall down, they will cry like all out, and then boom, it's over. And so, but then over time, we learn to, in essence, stuff the emotion. And that's part of growing up. I mean, we can't all, if someone cuts me off, I can't start bawling in my car, and so, but in some sense, we shut down emotions even in situations where it's appropriate to have them, and that, I think, causes a sense of weight. There's, I can't tell you how many people have come through the training who are overweight, even before GLP-1s.
Physically, yeah.
Yeah, physically overweight, who, by getting more current with their emotional sort of backlog, can lose weight that they've been trying to lose, for years and years. And it just seems to melt away because maybe they're just eating to kind of stuff that emotion.
Yeah. Well, we could talk all day. We both love, obviously,
chatting.
And you know what? We're in the realm of ideas. We're in the realm of knowledge. Even in this conversation, and unfortunately, there's no real way to create an experience
beyond the core
without if the core of what we do is an experience. You have to actually come experience it. Much like we could just talk about the gym and did you hear about those new did you hear about those new weights they got at the gym? Like these great machines that we could just talk all day about the machines they have and
what works best, what's less good.
There's
technique.
a great class I heard you could go to, but at the end of the day, like you have to actually go sweat your butt off, do the work, and you'll get the gains from it. So maybe in wrapping up, what would you say to someone who's maybe watching this and thinking about coming to our training, either Encounter Training or Possibilities for Life? What would you say to them to consider?
I think ultimately I would encourage them to get in touch with what they really long for, what they dream for. I think we tend to shut that down because it's just too poignant and kind of the longing that's unfulfilled is very hard to manage. And so to really get clear about what they want and ultimately by getting clear about what you want, you then begin willing to pay the price to get it, and so in some sense, since the fall, it's by the sweat of our brow, like you're saying. I can't just like look at the gym. I can't go, touch the weights and get strong. I've got to actually, move them. And so by the sweat of our brow. And so to be willing to work, you have to see something that's more worthwhile than the price. That the idea that, what I'm looking to have people envision is the value that they'll receive or what they want, and then they become willing to do the work because they're really targeted for something that they really want.
Yeah, and I'll end with my thought around this idea. It's been on the website for a long time. I actually recently changed it, but on the front of the website for a long time it said, transform the way you think and feel, live from your greatness. And I love that phrase, live from your greatness, to believe that God has made us for greatness. And maybe we shy away from that word. We go, greatness? I don't know. But when you think about it in terms of great love, great peace, great joy, like that's what God has made us for. And I think we all have that, any of us have that disconnect between singing the songs and reading the scriptures about it is for freedom that Christ has set us free, and the love and we fall short, and that is the journey to become Christ-like that we are on, the transformation that God has for us in this life. And all we're trying to be as the Encounter Training is an experience that help people become more of who God made them to be and a greater expression of who God's made them to be in the world.
Exactly. I mean, I think of when we say that, I think of John 10:10. The thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Jesus says, I have come that they would have life and life to the full. And that fullness, like you're saying, great love, great peace, great joy. That's the fullness of life that Jesus died for. All
right. Well, again, we are actually, as we're recording this right now, we're going to be starting an encounter tomorrow. Let's go.
Let's start tonight.
We have a lot of fun. I always view the training as like an adventure, like a grand adventure. Honestly, I think I like in the back of my head,
it's like Jumanji.
It's just starting. I'm like hearing like Lord of the Rings music. Like we're just little hobbits, just trying to go out and slay the dragons and
it's an epic
and make a big difference in the world. And so I pray that this week will be wonderful for everyone who comes and participates. And if you're thinking about coming to a training in the future, we would love to have you.
Excellent.